You're listening to SaskScapes, a podcast featuring the stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. A life fully realized. That's how I would describe my guest today. A painter that is loved by his community of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and celebrated as one of Canada's treasures. His work can be seen across Canada and is part of some very prestigious collections, including royalty. I'm Kevin Power, and this is Saskatchewan-born painter Gus Froese.
That's what we're going to talk to you about today, your life as an artist. We're in the beautiful Hammond building in Moose Jaw, in your stunning space. What a wonderful space that you have. What a luxury to be able to be an artist with their own studio like this. It's incredible. And I'm surrounded by your artwork, which no doubt you must feel very prolific as you sit here looking around.
Well, I have to store them someplace, and I had an exhibition along with Marge Moore. She's a quilter,
right?
And it was called A Collaboration. It was different because she quilted. She took one of my paintings and made a quilt that looked, you could hardly tell the difference. She did that with a number of pictures, and then she gave me several quilts, and I painted with acrylic paint and textile medium. That leaves it flexible.
Yes.
I painted pictures on it, and we did others, like we took a photograph, and we each did our interpretation of that photograph, quilting, painting. So that show was in Winnipeg, and then it's going to Holland, Manitoba, right. And that's where it's coming up in July. And from there, it's going to Saskatchewan, Nutana Church.
Yeah, that's not far from me. Oh, good.
Like on Lake Louise.
Yeah, Louise. Well, you're very lucky to be having your work exhibited. I know that's such an effort for young artists to even just get their work shown to begin with.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But you're established, so
I've been at it for a while.
You have been. So let's start, as my favorite saying goes, let's start at the very beginning, to quote
great.
Rogers and Hammerstein.
That's a good place to start.
Again, yes. So you were born in
Hawarden.
Yeah. Where's Hawarden, Saskatchewan?
That's north of here. It's south of Saskatoon.
Not far from Outlook?
Oh, across from Outlook.
Right.
Right. On the number, just south of the 15 highway, which goes to Outlook.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that at the turn of the 20th century was when they were building the railway connection between Outlook and Moose Jaw. Uh-huh. So that would have put your town on the map.
Hawarden?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my dad just came over to Canada. He and Mom and 4 kids came to Canada. They couldn't speak a word of English.
And they came from where?
From Russia.
Uh-huh. Oh.
And they couldn't speak a word of English, and he got a job at Hawarden on the railroad. So that's what they were doing. And that's where I was born. They didn't have any money at all. In fact, they escaped from the Bolshevik Revolution, right. So they didn't have anything. So they lived upstairs in the lumberyard. There was a bit of a cubby there, and they had 4 kids. 5. Anyway, I was born upstairs in a lumberyard.
Were you?
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder if that's why I became a journeyman carpenter.
Right.
Yeah. I love wood,
It was genetic.
Yeah.
It was, you were.
Yeah, he is a carpenter too.
Wow. There's a common thread in all the stories I tell when people talk about their families first coming to Canada, the hardship that families endured then. I don't know. It would be interesting to know if we could weather such hardship now. We're living such self-indulgent times. There was no chance to navel gaze back then.
Well, we'd sure have to do some adjusting. I just, like you say, it's hard to imagine what we would have done.
And you're not an only child?
No, I'm the 7th child. It's 8 boys and 6 girls, you see.
Wow. Right. And how often do you have the opportunity to get together?
Every Easter and every Christmas we have a family reunion.
Wow, wonderful. Where?
Oh, we take turns.
And your parents were a big influence on you growing up. Your mother was a quilter.
She quilted, right.
Mm-hmm. And your dad?
He had to farm to make a living, and mostly we raised horses and cows, cattle, pigs, chickens, goats, sheep, bees, everything, just to survive. And he was a very, very skilled carpenter. I should tell you something about it. Do you have time for a little?
Yeah, we have time for anything.
Okay, when they came to Canada, they had nothing, okay? And Dad thought he'd have to have a chair. And all he had, the tools he had was a jackknife, Or anyway, he found in the junk pile, he found pieces here, pieces there of a chair. So he put them all together. In some cases, he had to manufacture a piece and made a chair.
1927, my father fabricated this chair with pieces of old chairs that he found. Wow. And it's a chair of many colors.
Yeah, it is.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. How lucky you are to still have that piece.
To have that, yes, I'm lucky, all right, because I was teaching in Hanley at the time, the comp school, and there was a junk pile up in the pasture.
Right.
There was a dust bowl there, and they took everything, and when they moved from the farm, they took everything to the junk pile that they thought wouldn't be any good. Well, I went to the junk pile and I salvaged that chair and a number of other things that had gone to the dump. But I'm so happy I salvaged it.
And no plans to sell that?
No, it's not for sale. No.
Absolutely beautiful.
But I think I know that my sons would appreciate having it.
So I would expect growing up on a farm that you grew up as an observer of everything.
You can see everything.
The observing ignited the spark of your creativity.
I think it influenced my work a lot because if you look around, it's rural scenes largely, urban and rural, and so what else would why would I paint that?
Right.
I grew up with it.
Yeah.
And most of these paintings are experiences.
Yeah.
Or some of them, anyway.
It's your story through painting. Some write about it, you paint about it.
Right. Ice fishing.
Yes.
I've never done that.
I was going to say.
but I drove down there and I drove across Buffalo Pound Lake and it's just like a village. Tents scattered all over like this.
Wow.
And ice fishing. So I had to put that on a canvas. And pioneer shacks.
But you didn't start out as a full-time artist.
No.
You studied teaching to begin with.
Well, I taught, and I'm retired from teaching. And in the classroom type of teaching, I was there for 24 years. And then I took a leave of absence, and I had been teaching art workshops all over. And so that's what I did. And I couldn't afford to go back teaching. Teaching salaries weren't that good.
Right.
But anyway, I did that for 26 years.
But had you had a calling to be a teacher early on, or was there a conflict in you did you look at the possibility of being an artist full time, or was that just not even a question?
when Nona Mulcaster suggested it, at that time, that was in 1952, and an artist couldn't possibly make a living in those days.
Right.
So this is why I went for teaching instead. But I've had some past students tell me that it didn't matter what I was teaching. It was always teaching art, whether it was social studies or science or English or welding or drafting. It's always art.
So it's so much part of who you are that you can't talk about any subject without approaching it creatively.
I think it's involved in everything.
Yeah.
It's a big part of life for everybody, I think.
Yeah. And were you able to impart that specifically to your students, or was that just really something that they were intuitively able to pick up about you? I mean, did you...
I think that's right. Just pick it up.
Right.
But my B.Ed major was industrial arts, minor in languages, but I just switched completely after teaching shops and stuff. I taught art here at Peacock for 10 years.
Right.
And night classes and workshops all across Canada.
Right.
Well, from farthest east was Dauphin, Manitoba, in the comp school there. I was, and Victoria as far as west.
Mm-hmm. But we studied at the U of S Kinderdine campus.
Yeah, I did.
And you had a lot of influences there.
Well, when I finished Teachers College, I went straight to Emma Lake to take a class. And of course, what happened then, you took your Teachers College, and then you had to take classes like correspondence, summer school, etc., until you get a standard certificate. Then you go back for a year to finish off your B.Ed. Well, I went straight in there for an art class from Rita Cowley and Horace Wickenden. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but in 1958, after I'd taught for a number of years, I went back again and studied with Art Mackay and Roy Cayuga, and you might be familiar with them. And other than that, I took class from Art Mackay at Regina campus and ceramics from Jack Schur's Regina campus, and so on. Anyway, that was a part of my studies, was art.
Right. So, can you talk a little bit about the importance of teachers generally in our lives, and the importance that you place on teaching? You were quoted as saying, "Once a teacher, always a teacher." Oh,
I think so.
Yeah.
You can't get away from it.
Right. But it's amazing. You spoke of Winona Mulcaster as being a huge influence on you, and she recognized something in you that you hadn't even articulated yet for yourself.
Oh no, I knew nothing about art. That's my first art experience with her.
Right.
And she lives in Mexico. She has a property there, and she's been there for years.
Does she know the impact that she had on your life?
Oh, yes. We had a Teachers College reunion. I graduated in 1953, 50-year reunion in 2003. And the committee that organized, they phoned me and asked me to look after Winona Mulcaster. She was 90 at the time. And so I was supposed to pick her up and take her to the Teachers College and all this. Well, when Kathleen and I got to the building, the old Teachers College building on Avenue A, here this woman comes traipsing around the corner, and it was her, just bouncing. And she said, "Hi, Gus." I was so surprised.
Did you feel like a student all over again?
Yeah.
I find it really hard to meet teachers that had an influence on me and feel like a grown-up. I immediately go back to that stage of life.
Exactly. And she said, I hear that you're supposed to take me home tonight. Kathleen said, "Well, I'll have something to say about that." Anyway, we kidded around, but she was the speeches she made were the most meaningful of any speeches that were made all throughout.
Wow.
She's just really a solid person, and she's such a vivacious person. She's been my mentor from the beginning in teaching and also in art.
You were actively involved with the Saskatchewan Arts Board at one point.
I was 6 years.
Right. In what capacity?
Well, board on the executive.
Blessed is the Saskatchewan Arts Board. Where would we be without their support?
Oh, it was a beautiful experience.
Good. And you were also on the museum board here in Moose Jaw?
I was there for briefly. Yep.
Right. The Saskatchewan Government Collection. Talk about that. Your pieces are a part of that exhibit.
Yep.
And that's housed where?
Well, different offices,
right?
Have pieces of mine. And in the hospital, there you walk down the hallway and I see things that I did.
Wow. That's so great. But what does it feel like? What does it feel like to walk through a hospital and see, does it, of course, I'm sure it conjures up memories of
right.
The painting itself.
It's like a part of me, like a sibling or whatever, or a very good friend.
Right. That's wonderful.
That's what they represent.
You have another very good friend, another piece of yours, Prince Edward.
Prince Edward.
Prince Edward hangs in some small little shack somewhere, does it?
Yeah, it's a little shack in the suburbs of London.
Right. Buckingham something or other?
Buckingham, it's a palace.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Now, how did that come to be?
Well, Prince Edward,
yes,
there he is, holding as a picture in the palace. He is honorary lieutenant of the Saskatchewan Dragoons.
Right.
And the Saskatchewan Dragoons commissioned me to paint 2 portraits of him. One they took it to Buckingham Palace, and the other one to the armories here. So, and they're both like that, pretty much the same.
That's an impressive credit, Gus.
Well, I like the idea too.
But I mean, it's not everybody can say that they have a piece hanging in Buckingham Palace.
No,
tremendous sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, I think I feel good about it too.
What did it feel like when you made that transition from teaching to being an artist full time? It felt right. The timing felt right.
Yeah.
Was it scary from a financial point of view to make that leap?
Well, it would be, because I had no idea whether this would pay, make a living.
Yeah.
But I was so lucky that just when I decided to take a leave of absence at Peacock, my wife started teaching again. She was a teacher. And while the kids were growing up, she didn't teach. So now she started teaching again. So that's her living, from now on.
Right.
And while she wasn't teaching, she finished off her B.Ed and her master's degree.
Right.
Actually, while she was teaching. Also, so financially it didn't hurt us. But I'd been thinking about it, and I wanted the freedom of, like, being cooped up in a classroom is okay when there's a big blizzard outside.
Right.
But on another day, it might not be so okay.
Sure.
But this teaching of workshops, it's freelance teaching.
Yeah.
10 years of that I spent at SIAST or STI, like in my studio on Brown Street. We sold the house, and I had a huge studio in the backyard I built. And I had classes coming into my studio, like, all the way from kindergarten to grade 12. Just they'd drop in, and we'd talk about things, or I gave these little kids something to do very briefly because they only had one period to go or two.
So talk about your children. You were prolific not only in painting, but also in family.
Well, we had three boys. Our oldest boy, he's in Canmore, and he has, he and his wife have two kids. They're the only grandchildren we have. One is a girl. She lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia. That's where she graduated from St. Vincent.
Right, yes.
In Halifax. And the boy, he just graduated from high school, and he's a snowboard and skateboard freak. And he's been working in a skateboard shop as long as he can remember. I mean, since he was out of elementary school. And now he's moved from Canmore to Kelowna, working again at the same thing.
Did your oldest son pick up that artistic gene at all?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
He wanted to be an architect, and there was opening here in Regina. For 1 year, they had a college of architecture, and then it closed. So he had to move either to Calgary or Winnipeg. Well, Winnipeg wouldn't take any students out of province. But then finally they were sort of going down. Calgary was coming up, and it opened up, so he got in. And he went for about 2 years, and then he really, university didn't appeal to him that much, but he was really good in his work. So he became a designer builder. That's what he does.
Right.
And well, I think he's really good, and a lot of other people must think so because his designs are sought after.
Wow. What kind of, as an artistic dad, what do you impart to your children? I mean, you must have raised them also being observers.
Well, I guess that's genetic, maybe.
Yeah.
Like from their mother and from me. But
you encourage creativity.
Well, I think so. I built a studio in the backyard, and I worked in there, and I had a kiln and a pottery table, and I had an easel like I have here, and painting and drawing. They witnessed that daily.
Right.
And in fact, they didn't even take art in high school. They say they learned enough in the studio in the backyard.
I'm quite certain.
And well, Rich, the oldest one, he was always interested in taking classes that would really benefit him in the end because he wanted to be an architect or into that field.
Right.
And Rob, he was...
Rob is the second?
That's the second son, and he's into ceramics.
Yes.
And he sort of, I guess he got some start in my studio.
I should think. I'll be talking to him this afternoon, so I'll find out.
Oh, yeah. And then I took a class from Jack Schur's in Regina, and I think that really tipped him off. He really liked that. He ended up taking classes at the university got a BFA, and he's just gone. I think he's just great.
Well, you must. You're his dad, but I also get the sense that you would say that even if you weren't related, you seem to really admire his work.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody do work that's as good as that.
Wow.
Well, that's what I feel, even aside from being his dad.
Sure. Wow, that's wonderful.
And Kirby,
Kirby's the youngest?
Yeah. He became the manager of the Grapes wine bar.
Right.
And from there he became the manager of the wine store downtown. And he met people from all over the world. And okay, just briefly, one of them came from Australia, invited him to come to Australia and learn how to make wine. Another one from Napa Valley invited him. Another one from Chile, and Okanagan, and he went to these places learning how to make wine in different countries.
Sure.
Ended up being, probably one of the best winemakers in the Okanagan. And then he became, he was winemaker for different companies. And finally, he and somebody else started a winery in Oliver.
Yeah.
And after several years, he sold out and he came to Moose Jaw.
Right.
Now he's the manager of the Grant Hall.
So wine is his art form in many ways.
It is, yeah. I think that's quite an artistic thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and being a chef too. He studied that and became a trained chef.
Oh. Right.
But when we go to his place, we got gourmet stuff.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And Rob, he's no slouch at baking and cooking.
Right.
Also.
Right. So you're a well-fed family, well looked after after that way.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you've accomplished so much in your life so far. What's left?
Well, we always fit in some traveling, you know.
Yeah.
We've done several trips to Mexico, to Cuba, and Hawaii and stuff. And we hope to continue that on. There's nothing really pressing now. And I'm great at procrastinating.
Yeah.
And when I have a show slated for some date in the future,
Yeah.
I just sit back. And I guess I'm doing it while I'm not even putting a brush to
Sure.
it. But everything happens within the last month or so, even though I had 2 years or something.
I think most every artist would say that's true.
Yeah, I think so.
If you spend so much time, really, the sense of urgency is what really creates.
Right. And I'm always painting, whether I'm in my studio or not, or doing something like that.
I always like to talk to established artists and get their feedback on advice they would impart to young artists who are at that crossroads of questioning if they should choose this. Mm-hmm. Are they ready to choose this as a living? It's frightening even now to make that. Any artist, no matter what genre, it's not the easiest life financially. No. It never is.
You have to, I think, I'm sure, that you have to have something else, you know, like in my case, teaching.
Yeah.
Even after I left the classroom teaching, the other teaching was actually more lucrative than that.
Right.
And it sort of filled the gap. I make enough living off that. And every workshop I do, I'd have some pieces to show, and people were interested in buying them too. Mm-hmm. Right now, you say, what's my bucket list?
Yeah.
I would just as soon see some young fellow come in here, or a young person to do things, you know.
Yeah. Is your space available for people to do that? You seem to have quite an open door as far as welcoming people to stop by.
Yeah, it's anybody's welcome here anytime.
Right.
Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
I was going to ask you to talk a bit about, because of your time with the Saskatchewan Arts Board, the importance of grants to artists, that artists know how to apply for a grant properly.
We dealt with that a lot, and
it's a skill.
Yeah, you'd have to. I wasn't in charge of that, on the arts board, but somebody is, and we, all of us, got familiar of what is important for an artist to suggest in an application, Mm-hmm. So, if I'm asked now by some artist to write a report on his work so that his grant might be successful, mm-hmm. I'm willing to do that, and I think I have the skill to know what to put down there. It has to be the truth, for one thing,
yes.
but to put the right things down, mm-hmm. so that they're successful in their request.
Not everybody in Saskatchewan grows up in a town where there's a lot of access to art and artistic possibilities and courses.
No, right.
So what does somebody growing up in a small town population, I was in Willowbunch yesterday, 280, who, aspires to be an artist, how do you foster that when you don't have a lot of stimulus or a lot of opportunity?
And to break into this circle of successful, being an artist, successful artist, but even in a small place, nowadays, it's as big as the world. You don't have to be stuck in a little place. Right. You can touch base with a lot of other artists and go to a lot of galleries to see art. Where I never missed a show in I don't know how many galleries.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That no matter what your genre, that you devour art of all forms. That you go and listen to music. That you go and see dance. That you experience it all. It all informs what is your work.
And my wife feels the same way about art as I do, and so wherever we go to New York for the Christmas holidays or to New Orleans or whatever, we always stop at all the galleries that are there. Right. And she's just as knowledgeable about what's good art as I am. And that's a great help to me too.
Right, sure, I'm sure.
We support each other.
And in small town Saskatchewan, I'd like to think that there's always a Miss Mulcaster, a teacher in a school that recognizes the spark.
And I recall going to, we flew to Ottawa to see a show by Van Gogh. And this was a special show. It had pieces that were brought back from owners, a show that had never been viewed by anybody, a lot of the pieces. So we flew there and saw that, took a train to Toronto and saw in the Toronto gallery, we saw Picasso, the same type of show.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well, actually, it was, I think Ottawa. That's the National Gallery.
Yes.
That was Picasso, but anyway, those two artists, which I admire a lot.
Once considered very controversial, Picasso, and I spoke earlier with a group of 7 artists that are very involved in creating public art in big centers, temporary public installations of very modern, sometimes questionable pieces as far as their artistic merit goes. Mm-hmm. When I look at your work, it's clear what it is that you're trying to say in your work. from an artistic sense of view, when you see something that's incredibly esoteric, that many people would question as actually being art and why it's being funded, how do you still see beauty in all forms of art, or is there a line for you in which you say, well, that's just ridiculous?
Well, you're tempted to say it's ridiculous until you. I think you have to become educated to that. You see it over and over, and you see something in it more every time you see it. And, well, I think having been an art instructor, it might be easier for me to see what's really going on in the artistry of it.
Right.
Like Picasso, you say, everything is distorted.
Yeah.
But he has a sense of artistry, of balance, of color, of all these shape, form. And Van Gogh, also, he was more of a rural type.
Yeah.
And so all his work is based on the rural part of his experiences.
So how does a viewer who doesn't have that education to be able to step back and look at a piece that's not clear right from first glance, how do you learn those skills? Who are the educators? How does that education get disseminated?
Well, just you mean somebody who has had no art experience or education.
Yeah.
Well, this is, like you mentioned before, people think that's ridiculous, Yeah. But the job of the viewer, or if it's a job, the viewer experiences that over and over till finally they really appreciate what they see. At least I can speak for that because that's what happened to me.
Right.
It's a matter of being open-minded and educating yourself.
Yeah, there does need to be some involvement. Our viewers do have to sometimes work to appreciate a piece.
You're right.
Yeah, it just can't be spoon-fed all the time. I mean, I don't think artists set out to say, well, I must spoon-feed my audience, therefore I must create something extremely accessible. I don't think that anything informs. I don't think artists have a modus operandi behind what it is that they're creating. That's that specific.
Yeah, I think that's the way it is. I couldn't express it any better.
Yeah. I mean, it would be as detrimental to one's art form to have that going on from the onset as it would be to not be a procrastinator and to have all the time in the world to get something done when the true brilliance of your work occurs in the sense of urgency to get it done.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think in my case, or in my experience, I like to paint something that has a story behind it.
Yeah.
And when I paint murals, it has to have the first thing you get thrown at you is a theme.
Yeah.
And usually it's historic, the history of something. And then my job is to create an image or a series of images over superimposing and making a mural out of it. And you have to really study the theme thoroughly, because once you get on the wall, you can't make any mistakes. There are tourists or local people standing there watching. They might say, "Oh, no, that's not right," stuff like that.
Right.
But I just study it to that degree where I can't put anything on the wall that's not right.
Do you see your work in your mind? Do you before it actually gets realized on canvas?
I see it in my mind, but okay, take for example, there's a triptych.
Yes.
It's Lockwood. It's my wife's hometown.
All right.
The center is a painting that I did for a show, Vanishing Icons. The others also are vanishing icons.
Right.
The first picture, I taught at Lockwood in a rural school, and at the end of the school year, I went into town where they were building an elevator. And I asked the boss for a job. So I was on the crew that built this elevator.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, we moved to build another one. But anyway, that was my summer holidays. That picture is what it looked like when this elevator was finished, when it was built, you know.
Right.
And that's what the town looks like. The town is spread out this way. The third picture is that elevator being demolished.
When did that happen?
So many years later. That was in 2000.
Were you there for the demolition?
No, I missed it. They told me about it, and I just couldn't be there. But you see, this one happened in 1955. I was teaching there. And it stayed there for 45 years. And that's when they started demolishing all these elevators.
So that triptych is really a journey. Did you have all three in mind at the time you painted them? Did you paint them all at once?
I took them, they're my impression of photographs that I have.
Ah.
Okay, for example, the middle one, I painted it. That's the town of Lockwood, as it's been seen for years. Mm-hmm. And the part that is completely painted, it tells the story. So at the bottom, I just leave the sketch unpainted.
Right.
The story is already told, so why continue?
Right.
I had a number of these in that show, Vanishing Icons. But this triptych is very typically vanishing icons.
Right. What is it like to be involved in the building of a grain elevator?
Well, it's not everybody can do it, but I can go any height. It doesn't matter. I'm not scared of heights. Mm-hmm. The people who work on that crew aren't either, but when they pick up local workers, like, for example, in this one, they were up about 20 feet when I got there. And they had a local guy up there. And I started work by hauling rocks in it with a wheelbarrow. And the boss came to me and he said, "How would you like to be up there?" I said, "I'd kill for that." He said, "Well, there's a guy up there. He says he can't stand the height. Just go up there and tell him that you take over. He'll just throw." Everybody had to buy a hatchet for pounding spikes and notching and a handsaw. He just threw it at me. He said, "I'm finished." And I didn't even have to buy it. But no,
He was ready to get down.
it just, I'm not scared of heights at all. I was swinging from the rafters up in the cupola.
Wow. Do you remember any tragedies that happened during the building of that grain elevator? Any major accidents?
Yeah, on our crew, nothing happened except once when the call went for lunch. Everybody tried to get down as fast as they could.
Right.
And one guy, he thought he'd get over. There was a rope to take all our lumber up, a winch, a frog they called it. Yeah. Well, he grabbed the rope, and he was going to shinny down on that rope. Luckily, we weren't up that high, but the rope wasn't attached to the other end, so he practically did a free fall.
Wow.
And he wrecked his feet in a pile of lumber.
He's lucky that's all he wrecked.
Yeah. I just wanted that job, and I got it.
No stranger to manual labor.
No way. No.
Not every artist can say that.
Well, you grow up on the farm with 7 brothers, 6 sisters. You have to pull your weight. You don't slack off.
Right.
And that was a great help, too.
Your life has been fully realized, Gus. You've experienced a tremendous amount, and you're so fortunate to have this artistic form in which to express it. And I get the sense that you don't have any regrets for the journey that you've taken.
No, I'd do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And while teaching, you see, I had to supplement my meager income. And so in summertime, from 1963 to 93, 30 years, I went hail adjusting to crops, adjusting hail losses. And I enjoyed that. It was outdoors, met farmers all over Saskatchewan, and I enjoyed it. And then in 93, after a few years, the murals kicked in, and I was doing murals all across the country. And so I had to drop one thing, mural painting or hail adjusting. Well, I guess I get bored easily, and I thought, gee, I'd rather paint murals. So I dropped the hail. And so after that, summer and winter too, sometimes for indoor murals, I was busy with that, and that paid off. I mean, they had to pay you. For example, the one on the grain elevator.
Yes.
That's a maquette, you know. That's what would happen. It's 60 feet high and 50 feet wide.
Right.
And so when you get to the top, you can't be afraid of heights.
I should think not. Which is interesting because I tend to think that folks that grew up on the prairies, heights are
well, yeah.
You're not fond of being surrounded by mountains.
No.
Open spaces, and certainly heights aren't something you grew up with. Where did you get that from? I guess you just grew up fearless.
Well, I guess, I don't know. Some people naturally are afraid of heights. And I'm not. Anyway, the painting of murals took over, and when we painted this, it's the year before I was it's in Boys of Ain, Manitoba. And I painted several murals in Boys of Ain, and a friend of mine, Jackson, he was painting in Boys of Ain too. And this one time we were painting, and the master ceremony on a flat deck. We were all signing our murals for that summer. He said, someday we might even have a mural on that elevator across the street. That's the way he talked. And he said, now Gus will sign his mural. And before I went, I jumped up on a flat deck and took the mic. He said, yeah, I'd like to get cut loose on that elevator. He said, you would want to paint that? Yeah. Anyway, that next winter, the murals committee approached me about it, and then I got Jackson involved too, because we thought someday we might try one together, jointly. So we did that. Wow. It was kind of fun to do, but
I'm glad that I was able to record some of your stories. Any plans to write a book on your life experiences?
Well, there was one guy in Moose Jaw, he took pictures of all my murals across Canada, and he was going to write a book, Larger Than Life, Murals by Gus Froese.
Yes.
But he never finished it. I've got the rough copy here, that's all. But so here you have all the murals, or some of the murals that I've done.
How many have you done in total? Have you counted them all?
Oh, gee, it must be somewhere near 100 or so.
And how far east can we find them?
Actually, Oshawa, Kitchener, Kenora.
Yeah.
And at one time, this is no, I shouldn't tell this story. Anyway, in Ottawa, Picasso had a show in the National Gallery, and across the river on Hull is the what do you call it, Museum of Mankind.
Yes.
And I was showing in there. It wasn't a mural, but it was an interview done of the mural when I was painting this one.
Mm-hmm.
So they put that on the permanent display in the Museum of Civilization. And Picasso's show was all done and taken away, and mine kept going. So a year or two.
You outlived Picasso.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a good legacy to have.
Oh, sure.
Who inspires Gus Froese whose artistry inspires you?
Well,
present or now deceased?
Okay. Noah Mulcaster, for one.
Yes.
Ernest Lindner. When I was taking classes at Emma Lake, Lindner had a cabin on Ferry Island. He owned that island, and that's the island you see across there.
Right.
And every day when we went to class, here's Lindner tramping across campus with a backpack, and he's already finished work. He's heading over, canoed over to his island, to his studio, and painted. And I got to know him fairly well. And I just really enjoyed his work. But that doesn't mean I would paint like him.
Sure.
I just liked the way he painted. And maybe it influenced mine too, I'm not sure. Yeah, Rembrandt, he's an influence to everybody, I think.
What do you think of Andy Warhol's work?
Oh, yeah, that's another one. It's it's super realistic, and you have to admire anybody who can work that tight and realistically.
Right.
But there are others who do the same thing, like Lindner is just very realistic, but it has a painterly quality about this realism. Warhol doesn't. It's just a duplicate. You see the label on a can. There's no impressionism there. It's just like a photograph.
Yeah. Well, you're an institution in this town, Gus. I mean, your reputation precedes you. So when I phoned around Moose Jaw to inquire who I should speak with, you were consistently the name that came up. So you're really you're well loved in this town.
Well, thanks. That's good to know. Yeah, I mean,
I love that you don't know that.
I'm flattered.
That's good. That's good. Humility is a very important thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm so glad we had the opportunity to talk.
Oh, me too. It's been interesting to chat.
You enjoy talking about your experiences. You really do.
Well, sure. It's been an enjoyable life. I would do it all over again.
Thanks for listening. The SaskScapes podcast is created by Kevin Power as part of the Culture Days Animateur program operated by Sask Culture. Funding to the cultural sector is provided through the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust Fund for Sports, Culture and Recreation. If you want to hear more of these podcasts, or to see the great work being done by other Sask Culture animateurs, please visit www.iheartculture.ca. Special thanks to Paved Arts in Saskatoon for their technical support. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. There is no end to the stories to be told. So, until next time,